Hello and welcome to the Science Fiction and Fantasy Marketing Podcast, the show where we help you establish your author brand, increase the size of your audience, and sell more books. I'm Lindsay Baroker, and I'm here with Jeffrey Poole and Joe Lalo. And today's guest is Mark Lefebvre. He's from Kobo. You've probably heard him on other podcasts, but I'm going to try to ask a couple questions and maybe he hasn't answered elsewhere yet, even if we have to get deeply personal on him to ferret these out and keep it interesting. But for those who don't know, Mark is the Director of Self-Publishing and Author Relations at Kobo.com, and he's also an author himself, writing horror under the name Mark Leslie. Hi, Mark. Welcome to the show.
Hey, it's great to be here, Lindsay. And I'm okay to get personal.
All right, so I'll save the boxers or briefs questions for the end to tease people so they listen to the whole show. All right, why don't you tell us kind of how you got started writing and what led you into a gig at Kobo?
So I was always frightened of the monster under the bed. I was always scared of the dark, and I believe maybe I started writing as therapy. I started writing stories, wanted to share these stories, these crazy things that were going on in my head, and pounded out my first novel when I was 13. And I'll use air quotes when I say novel because I think it was probably about 15,000 words, and it was a fantasy adventure based on Arnold Schwarzenegger's version of Conan the Barbarian, based on my Dungeons and Dragons adventures, and so that was the thing that I knew I wanted to do from the time I was 13. I got into book selling when I was in university as a part-time. It was a part-time job. I knew I wanted to be a writer. My parents gave me really, really good advice and said, "You'll never make any money writing, so you better have a good day job," which was very practical of them. They really believed in me. But it worked out well for me because I picked a day job in book selling, and that eventually led to Kobo. The short version of the story was I've worked in virtually every type of bookstore imaginable. I have not worked in a used bookstore, and I've not worked in a Christian bookstore, but I've worked in almost any other kind of bookstore chain, independent campus bookstore, online bookstore, and I was running an espresso book machine at the McMaster University bookstore and was working with local authors who wanted to get their books published. I had actually self-published a book in 2004 using print-on-demand, so I was familiar with print-on-demand technology. And as I was working with authors with this espresso book machine, they were interested in books made into ebooks because back in 2009, Kindle was out. Ebooks were becoming a new thing, and I created an account with Kobo as a vendor to help my authors get their books into Kobo's catalog. And it was challenging because it's even harder than Google is, or was when you were allowed to get into Google. And shortly after that, I ended up meeting with Michael Templin, who I had worked with previously in the book industry, and he was talking about the idea that Kobo wanted to make it easier for self-published authors to get their works into Kobo. And so this job came up. They created a role. I got the role. I got into Kobo. They kind of sat me down at a desk and said, "Okay, figure out how we're going to help self-published authors." And about 6 months later, I got to work with some really smart people, and we came up with Kobo Writing Life, which launched in 2012. And Kobo Writing Life currently sits at about between 12 to 15% of Kobo's weekly business, which is larger than the world's largest publisher in terms of unit sales on a weekly basis. So I think about all of the amazing authors that I get to work with, and I think that we're rocking it. We're rocking it big time.
Awesome, cool. So the Conan book didn't attract a publisher and prove the parents
No.
wrong?
I have an old girlfriend who actually has a copy of it that she threatens every once in a while, jokingly, to release into the world. It was basically, it was a horrible, horrible book that should remain in a trunk or burned somewhere probably. But again, as most writers will tell you, it's that exercise of every single thing that you write, you become a better writer. So I'd like to think I'm a little bit better than the guy who's riffing off of Arnold Conan.
All right, it sounds like you got into self-publishing really early. You've also done some stuff with traditional publishers, haven't you?
I do have a series of nonfiction paranormal books that I write with Dundurn, which is actually Canada's largest independent publisher. And I just have this month coming out in May, actually, Creepy Capital, Ghost Stories of Ottawa, which is Canada's capital. And that's my fourth book in the nonfiction, and I will call it Tales Told as True. And I use air quotes with that because whether or not you believe in ghosts, people love to share ghost stories. So I approach it with an open mind, and I basically allow the reader to decide whether or not they want to believe that there was a ghost in this particular locale, or that it can be explained some other way. And I kind of like that. I like that sort of debate and the argument, because that's part of the fun of sharing ghost stories, is that ever questioning what if.
Well, and then it's so dark up there in Canada in the winters and stuff, so you have a lot of hours when supernatural things could be happening out there.
Oh, most of the time, most of the time.
So just for those who are Canadian authors that might be listening, I'm sure we've got two or three. Is it would you recommend a new authors like go direct to Kobo and self-publish, or are there opportunities there to get kind of the, like we have the big five, of course, in the U.S. Is Canadian publishing has an equivalent, or do they usually apply to U.S. companies?
There's a Canadian branch of the major publishers. There's like a Random House Canada and a HarperCollins Canada. There are major branches. There's actually some pretty decent Canadian publishers. What I like to recommend authors is I don't think an author should set their be set in stone in terms of the direction that they take. I know that there are some books that I will self-publish because I know the market is good for it. I understand the market, and I can sell to that market. I know that Dundurn, for example, knows this particular market, so I will continue to write nonfiction paranormal books with them. I mean, one of the things they do for me that I would never be able to do on my own, because I kind of know a little bit about self-publishing, is they get my books into Costco. So that's kind of sweet to go in and see your books on a skid beside Stephen King. And I know it's maybe an ego thing, but boy, oh boy, when the books are in Costco, do you ever sell a lot of copies? So because Costco typically, and again, it's not going to be nationwide at Costco. It's been carried regionally in various areas. So Ottawa area Costco's will probably have my Ottawa book, just like the Hamilton ones had the Hamilton and Sudbury had Sudbury, etc. So I think an author needs to look at what does that publisher do that they can't do themselves? What can they do that a publisher can't do? And you have to answer both questions to see what is right for you. And about 50% of my work goes to traditional publishing, and the other 50% I get to do exactly what I want with.
Nice. So you mentioned that Kobo it's cool that you're actually getting, what is it, 12, 15% from of the total income is coming from independent authors. How big would you say overall that Kobo is? I know you guys are in just lots and lots of countries.
Yeah, so I mean, we're, depends on who you talk to, right? You can talk to a publisher, you can talk to different indie authors, and for different indie authors, we represent a different percentage of the market. We probably have a pretty low percentage of overall market in the US, which would probably be like low double digits or even single digits in some cases. Depends on the region that you're in, and it depends on the buyers that you're speaking to. In Canada, we probably represent what Kindle represents in the US in terms of our market share. And in similar ways, countries like Australia, we have a much higher percentage. Probably, I would say, somewhere closer to 60%, even though iBooks is strong internationally, as well as in the US, of course. So there's a lot of other markets where we have a bit more of a foothold. Italy and Netherlands, we're growing quite strong because of our partners. Kobo has retail partners in different territories, and the retail partner really helps us expand the brand because, as you know, I think all three of you are from the US. As you know, we're probably not as well known south of that 49th parallel.
No, but I was talking to somebody that was saying maybe Kobo or Rakuten will buy out Barnes and Noble when when Barnes and Noble ever folds, and I was like, I don't know, they're not really in the U.S., so it doesn't seem like I have no idea, but I guess we'll watch for that.
I kind of, I mean, personally, I like there being at least four players in the market, or more, because it keeps all of us honest. It gives authors more opportunity for growth. If something happens to one of us, there's other people to pick up the slack, and so I kind of, um, yeah, I worry, and I hope that Nook can stick around, because I know there's some authors that do really, really well on Nook, and if that dries up, that's a big chunk of money for a lot of people, and I'd hate to see that happen.
Yep, I would hate to see them go too. They're my number two, but I don't know. Haven't gotten them on the podcast yet, so they obviously can't be as cool as Kobo. Just to give a little perspective, because I know authors will often be frustrated that they're not selling as many books when they go wide, as many books on Kobo and the other sites as they'd like to. I think in a couple of your podcasts you mentioned that all of Canada, the population was like the equivalent of California in the US, and I guess we
Pretty
kind of
much.
forget that. We're like, why am I just not selling as many here as on Amazon?
Right.
So any thoughts about that, or
I think a few things to keep in mind. It takes longer to develop an audience with Kobo. Think about that population. Our biggest country where we sell the most books is the size of one of 52 states. 52. I don't know how many states you guys have. You just
50 and
the
some
state of
extra
panic
thing?
lately. So, but that's the thing, right? If an author is selling 100 books a day on Kindle and they're selling 10 books a day on Kobo, they're killing it on Kobo comparatively when you look at the population base and where we have most of our customers. We have 20 million customers on Kobo. Seems like a big number, but and Amazon never reveals their numbers, but I'm sure they have much, much more, or many, many, many more customers. So when you're looking at your sales on different platforms, you have to consider where they're selling, not just how many you're selling. Because one of the challenges that I often have from an author is they say, well, I've only sold this many books on Kobo, and I sell this many on Kindle, and then I say, well, how many on Kindle are you selling in Canada and in Australia and in these other countries? And if they look at outside the US and outside the UK, Kobo is a lot more competitive for those customers. And that's the perspective to look at. Particularly, and I just got back from London Book Fair, and every time I spend time in overseas, I recognize that there's so many countries in Europe that are where our industry was 5 years ago. I mean, France, which we have a really good customer base comparatively, um, is still primarily a print-dominated area. So even my authors who are doing really, really well in France are still just seeing the tip of that iceberg. It's still just growing. And that's the thing that's really hard to get your head around, because for people like Lindsay, I know you've been in the game for a long time. You're a veteran. You're an ebook publishing guru. Therefore, you look back, in the last 3 or 4 or 5 years and go, "Oh my God, things are going so slow." But to the rest of the industry, and I think I'm stealing from Mark Dawson's podcast when he interviewed Marie Force recently. She said there's been more change in the publishing industry in the last 3 years, more change in the last 3 years than they've seen in the last 60 years. And that's pretty dramatic. So it seems slow to us on the ground level, but there's so many people who still have not read an ebook in Canada and the US even. So those are things that give me hope that while the market share may be low in those territories, there's still 60 to 80% of readers haven't yet discovered the thrill and magic of reading digitally.
Yep. All right. Now Mark's made me feel old here. It's like 5 years in the industry. You're ancient. It was funny though at the Smarter Artist Summit. I was sitting with the other sci-fi fantasy people and saying, "Oh, you guys don't know. When I got started, we didn't have cover designers," and they thought I was joking. I'm like, "No, really. You had to go to DeviantArt and find somebody, and then hope they could do typography of some kind." So yeah, there's definitely been a lot of changes in the last few
They
years.
were waiting for you to launch into the old, and we walked
Yes,
uphill both ways to school in 10 feet of snow,
that's
all that
right.
stuff.
I had
Yeah.
to do that to get to my cover designer. So, all right. Well, let me hand you to the guys. We're going to come back later and ask some marketing questions. I know people want to know how to sell more books on Kobo, but I think we got some more introductory stuff here.
Yep. I've been in self-publishing about as long as Lindsay. I've been with Kobo through Smashwords since around 2010, beginning of 2010. And my income with Kobo has been steadily increasing, particularly in Canada and Australia. While this conversation was going on, I was checking the most recent numbers, and sure enough, Kobo is beating Amazon when it comes to sales in Canada. So that's true, and it has, like I say, it's been getting steadily better for me since I started. Has Kobo been growing steadily, or have I just been one of the lucky ones?
Two things. You've been in the game long term. You've built a customer base, and you haven't abandoned the customer base, and that's a slow, steady build. It does take usually at least 3 to 6 months before you start to get anything. If you've been in the game from the beginning, you should be seeing that growth over time. It's just a natural thing that happens. Um, we're also growing in different areas. We're trying different things. There's a customer acquisition team that currently in Canada and the US and the UK, for example, we have a $5 activation credit. Download our free apps from Android, iOS, Mac, PC, or if you buy the reader or whatever. Your new account, you get a $5 credit. Well, not a bad way to start. We've been doing different acquisition strategies like that, giving people, even at some of the conferences we've gone to, handing out, in addition to that, a $5 gift card. So you can start off with $10. Now in the indie world, $10 get you at least 2 books, if not more, or a decent box set. So that's not a bad way to get started. The other thing we've been doing for customer acquisition, and this is particularly effective on Android because iOS, as you probably know, block Kobo and Kindle and any of us from being able to sell through the platform because they take a 30% cut, and that leaves us with nothing because that's all we get. So we can't actually sell through those apps. But on Android, we've seen a huge conversion, and this is something we do curated right out of Kobo Writing Life, is the free. We used to call it free first in series, but we recognize that while that works really, really well, it could be any free book so long as there's a call to action that requires you, demands you as a reader that you really have to read the other book by that author. And we've been using that in the particularly in the Android platform, first-time user experience, pushing the free books, because what we really want people to do is try e-reading, try it for free. Here's some really good titles that we think you'll like, and we're so confident you're going to like them that you're probably going to go on to buy. But what we want to do is we want to remove that resistance and get them to just start reading immediately. No credit cards, nothing else. Just get in there. And for me and for my team, that has allowed us to help some authors who've never had any traction sometimes. And I know I'm getting into the marketing here, but sometimes that's all it takes just to get more eyeballs in front of your books. And sometimes that's all it takes is that little kick in the pants to get that book moving.
Yeah, come to think of it, I was part of a free first in series promotion with Kobo. I think Mark Coker wrangled it because again I'm through Smashwords. So and again I've seen steady growth, so it's a pretty good indicator I think that that's an effective promotion.
No, that's fantastic, and the fact that you have Mark on your side as well is a good thing, because I know the aggregators who send stuff to us work with the merchandising team, and they try to call out authors that they want to help succeed. So the fact that he's gotten you into some of those promos has been fantastic, and you want to hang on to that.
Absolutely. If we can go to talk about your writing for a moment. Your bibliography includes a lot of short stories for collections and anthologies. In the past, have you written short stories specifically for collections, or do you shop around for markets for existing short stories?
I think for the most part, I was writing short stories because that's all I had time to do. I was working full time because I was a bookseller, and I don't think I've worked less than 60 hours a week in the last 20 years because I love what I do, and that's just been part of the passion. So short fiction was always something that I did. I think in the early days, I'm going to make Lindsay feel young again. In the early days when I used to manuscript, like type things out on a manuscript, believe it or not, and mail submissions to publishers, the I guess the rule of thumb was get started by selling short fiction to magazines and anthologies, build a name for yourself, then try to sell a book to a publisher. And so that's how I got my start. I only recently went back to writing short fiction only because I had an opportunity. It was invitation from the editor where they want a story from you. Well, hey, if it's a guaranteed sale, I'll write a story. Or an anthology that I just felt so strongly about that I wanted to submit to. But I don't write as much short fiction as I used to because I've got a bunch of longer book projects on the go.
Yeah, my short book projects tend to turn into long book projects anyway. So you have been on both sides of writing in that you have written books and you're also a bookseller in every facet of book sales. Presumably being a bookseller has informed your position in Kobo, but do you think being an author has contributed anything to your position?
For sure. I think one of the reasons I got the job I got at Kobo was because I was an author. I know Michael wanted somebody who understood not only the business part of book selling, which I had, but understood authors and could actually relate to authors at their level, not at a corporate level, not at a, yeah, I kind of understand what it is you do, but at the base roots level, right? When we develop something for Kobo Writing Life to, a tool or whatever, this afternoon we were looking at the mock-ups of the new international pricing. And again, I sit back and look at it and go, okay, as an author, am I going to use that? How am I going to use it? What am I going to want with it? And that's usually one of the first things that I can just do that by instinct. And so I think that gave me a huge advantage for this particular job. I think it gives me a huge advantage because when I listen to an author, it takes me less time to understand what they're talking about because I get it. I'm there. I'm with them. There's more empathy, not just sympathy. I was like, oh yeah, I understand. I use that platform too. I know exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, and it's good to hear that like sort of we want allies in the trenches like that. Yeah, that's the questions I had for this section. So I'm going to hand you off to Jeff for a couple more before we get into marketing.
Alrighty, I originally had 3, but I've since moved one to marketing because as I was reading the questions, like, yeah, this one should be best geared for the next section. But first question for you. With your position at Kobo and obviously your history as a bookseller, clearly you've seen hundreds, if not thousands, of books. Have you noticed any common mistakes you see authors do that can easily be avoided? Cover too unprofessional, blurb containing typos, anything of the like?
Yes and yes. Unfortunately, even today, with podcasts such as your podcast, so many free resources, so many amazing indie authors willing to spend 5-10 minutes talking to you to help you out, and yet people still make those same mistakes. Just because you can push the publish button doesn't mean you should. It's kind of scary because it's that first impression thing. It really is, and it's the hardest thing that I have to do in my job is to tell someone that their baby is ugly. And I mean, that's kind of what you have to do because I'm not going to do you any favors if I just go, yeah, that's really nice. But I do try to be gentle because I understand I've sat there and I've had friends look at my manuscript and go, really, like this? You call this writing? So you have to be very, very gentle and understand and say, all right, let's look at your cover and then let's look at the top 10 bestsellers in that category. Do you see any similarities? No? Okay. What's different? You know what I mean? Like not be mean about it, but just actually
Right.
look at it, break it down, analyze it, make it not personal. Um, that's that's one of the big things. I think the other thing, and I know this is probably advice that you guys have already given yourselves, but working on that next book is the best way to sell a book that you already have out. Focusing on not just focusing on the fact that the book is there, but focusing on the elements that make what you put into the book interesting. And again, I'm leaning more towards the marketing, but what I think a mistake that authors often make is they want to jump to selling right away without building their reputation, their brand, their persona, their character, and all of those things that will make them interesting so that the prospective buyer says, wow, I'm interested in that person. Oh my God, they've written a book. I should check that out. I think there's this in our digital age, there's a rush to think that, okay, I'm going to publish my book. I'm going to sit there and watch my dashboard, and I should see the first $1 million come in by Friday. I mean, yes, it's digital. Yes, it's fast. Yes, stuff like that can happen. But thinking that everything's going to happen immediately is probably one of the biggest frustrations that a lot of authors face.
Very true. In your own opinion, what would new authors be surprised to learn about when it comes to the different services that Kobo offers? For instance, are there any out there that you guys offer that you feel more authors should be taking advantage of but aren't?
You mean services or just what we have available?
Either or, actually.
Well, I think I like to talk the international game because if you're probably already publishing, you're probably already on Kindle, probably already doing well in the U.S. How are you going to do outside the U.S.? And that's where, in Kobo Writing Life, we've built in the tools so you can actually set your prices in, Canadian and Australian and pounds and all the other currencies. And I think taking the time to pay attention to those markets is an investment that you make in that future. So that's something that even people who are using the platform don't take full advantage of. And so when it comes time for them to want to be part of a promo, we say, great, this promo isn't just US, it's US, Canada, Australia, New Zealand, Great Britain. You need to enter prices for all those territories or we won't accept your title. Everything else looks good. Cover's great. Synopsis looks like a fantastic title. Your price is in the right range, but you need to go in and set that. And I mean, that's a discussion we have every single day with authors, so it's not like a rare thing. I think the other thing people may not think about when they think about Kobo is our audience, our readers. It's the only audience we have in the world. We don't have people buying anything else but digital books, ebooks. So we're kind of unique in that regard. When you go to Kindle or Amazon, you're going to the world's everything store. They have pretty much everything. I just got something awesome in the mail from them. I got a nice little travel pack charger, and because you go and you just order whatever you want from Amazon and it ships to your door within a few days. You go to Barnes and Noble, you get print books and you get ebooks. You go to Apple, you get music, you get videos, you get ebooks, you get et cetera, et cetera. Kobo is all about reading, and it's all about digital reading. That's one thing that I think people maybe forget about.
Good to know. Yeah, it's like Amazon. I just got dog shampoo from them today. So, yeah, they're
There you
the
go.
world's biggest marketplace. But yeah, I never considered that either. As Kobo's books, and nothing but books, and of that, digital books. So that's good to know. Let me hand you over to Lindsay. She's got some marketing questions for you.
All right, the part of the show that everybody's been waiting for. Not that we don't want to hear about your Amazon deliveries, Mark. So since we do kind of try to focus a little bit on sci-fi and fantasy here, or at least 2% of the time, I kind of know from talking to you before that thrillers and romance do well at Kobo. Could you kind of give us the state of sci-fi and fantasy, or some people rocking it over there?
Yeah, you know what? I think sci-fi and fantasy authors are probably in a better position now than they would have been a year ago on Kobo. A year ago, if I would have talked to you about the best sellers, so when I looked at the top 10, I think 9 of the top 10 best-selling authors were women, and they were writing romance, or what I like to call more active romance, the more adult content. And there was one fantasy male author on that list. That was Daniel Aronson. He was writing a fantasy. He would pop in every once in a while to visit the ladies in the top 10. And he would visit the romance ladies and hang out with them for a while. And then he'd go. This year, I think I shared this with you a few weeks ago at the Smart Artist Summit. Lindsay Broker is hovering between the second best-selling and third best-selling author in the last 180 days on Kobo with your fantasy, and now you've got sci-fi titles as well. Daniel's in there. We have Brandon Sanderson, who makes an appearance. He actually does publish independently as well. He actually has a line of books that he does independently, as well as the ones he does with a big publisher. And there's a few different fantasy and paranormal authors who are now on that list. So I think romance is relegated to maybe 50% of the top. We've got a lot of thrillers and mysteries, and then we've got a lot of crossover. So you get things like Alex Berg is doing the crossover science fiction mystery noir, and so you get this weird combination. And so I think that's one of the things that science fiction writers and fantasy writers are really good at doing, is they're really good at blending elements from different genres. It's an urban fantasy mystery, or it's a paranormal romance, or whatever, right? So you've got multiple elements. You're appealing across genres. And I think what's happening, as maybe it's as digital books are maturing, because keep in mind they're pretty young. Digital books, you can think of it as maybe the last 5 years. I think sci-fi and fantasy authors are finally coming into their own in the digital space, and I'm not sure if you guys are seeing the same thing across the other platforms, but there seems to be more of an appetite. Now, books like The Martian get made into a movie, the whole publishing industry is going to start pivoting towards science fiction again. You're seeing a lot more elements in television related to, like, Supernatural has been on for 12 seasons or something like that. There's definitely an appetite for speculative literature, and so I think science fiction and fantasy authors who have been hanging in there are probably going to start to see more and more opportunities, not just on Kobo, but I can imagine across most of the platforms.
All right, well, that's good news for us, for sure. I didn't ask you this ahead of time, so I don't know if you might not have peeked at the numbers and know, but have you noticed that if any of the international, other countries that you're in, if any of them particularly like, should we be targeting, I've noticed Germany's strong for me, like, are there any countries where we should really go for those guys?
Yeah, so there seems to be a thirst for speculative fiction in Germany, in Italy, in a little bit in the Netherlands. I've started to notice with some of the authors that I'm looking at in detail, and then Spain and Mexico. And so it's interesting to see that there is a different appetite. And so again, and I'm thinking not of translated fiction, thinking of English, because even though primarily in Italy you're going to be selling books in Italian, but you're still also selling books to English reading people. And so that's something that you see. There's some countries in Africa, South Africa, and oh God, there's one in mid-northern. I'm not good with geography. I have to look it up on a map. But there is a country that I've noticed science fiction authors tend to do well in. Poland. It's interesting that when I'm trying to think of the different science fiction authors that I work with, looking at the trends of what countries they're selling better in. That's where I'm trying to pull these numbers from.
Cool. Do you have any thoughts on how we can maybe reach those people when we're marketing? I know BookBub has started doing India and the UK and some other countries, but most of the sponsorship sites are just kind of asking for the links to the US store or the basic Canadian Kobo store.
Yeah. See, BookBub. I mean, most of those sites are run from American companies and they're very US centric. BookBub has started to branch out and do a little bit more international. I would advise, so India is a market I think it's important to share because you can control your price in different currencies. It's critical if you want to sell any books in India to go as low as you possibly can, and I think 49 rupees is as low as you can go. And the reason is that print books in India are so cheap that it looks like those ridiculous publishers who price the ebook higher than the print book. And you got to know they're doing that to try to drive people back to the print book because they're terrified because they sell dead trees, they don't sell books. And so in places like India, you have to really, really pay attention. So one of the things we started to do on the Kobo Writing Life blog at kobowritinglife.com is work with our merchandisers in the 16 different territories and have them talk to publishers and authors about what is an optimum price for these territories so that authors who are trying to expand and go global have a fighting chance of understanding the market better.
Yeah, I think I thought I was pricing low in India. Like I think I was going to like maybe 129 or something, and then it was maybe either you or Joanna Penn is always talking about the India, and she's had interviewed a couple Indian authors, but she's like, how if you're at 49 is the lowest you could go, you're probably still too high for this market. I'm like, oh well, maybe I'll go a little lower.
That's got to be a volume game there, right? Considering how many English reading people they have.
Well, at least it doesn't cost us with digital books anything to, once we've put the cost into editing and cover art, it's not like we're losing money if we're pricing low in another country.
It's just gravy, right? It's additional sales in another territory.
And who knows, maybe someday you'll be invited to like an Indian science fiction convention to to talk because you've caught on over there.
Oh, that would be awesome. I would have so much fun eating there.
They do have those good curries. All right, so a lot of people right now are going to Kobo through Smashwords or Draft to Digital. Could you talk about why they might want to consider going through Kobo Writing Life?
I think control is probably the best reason for you to do that. Being able to make a change, being able to enter multiple currencies. I don't know, you can't yet do that on Smashwords, I think is US only. So you can't actually control a Canadian price through Smashwords. Maybe they'll change that. I know Draft to Digital allows a really good price control across currencies. We've built in some tools directly into Kobo Writing Life, and they're still in late beta phase, and this is a promotional tool. So kind of like similar to you go to BookBub and you see you can submit to a different promo. We have it built in, so if your book's published through Kobo Writing Life, you can just select your books. You don't have to re-enter it and enter a whole bunch of links and stuff like that, and maybe get the wrong ISBN or whatever. So we've got some tools built in, and the Kobo Writing Life dev team is iterating maybe every 6 to 8 weeks with a new update, and so there's constantly new updates to the tool, and these updates are based specifically on talking to authors like yourselves. Every single conversation we have with authors, something comes up and they say, oh, I really like this, but I wish that. Make a note of it. We compare our notes, we come back. So Christine is the US manager, and Camille and Diego overseas. We get together on a weekly basis. We say, well, this is what I'm hearing from authors. This is what I'm hearing. We collect, we find out what the more popular requests are, and that goes to the dev team. And we sit around the table and debate. All right, it's going to take us this many weeks to work on that, this many weeks to work on that. What's more important? As it stands, I think they still have about 18 months worth of development, and that's never getting any shorter. because the minute they release something, I got 10 more crazy ideas for them.
Okay, and something you guys have added, like, I don't know, in the last 6 months or so is the promotions tab. Is that available to all authors now, or do they have to email to ask for it?
So it's in beta because there's still some functionality that is not 100% working. But you can email writinglife@kobo.com and we can enable the tab. But one thing we do before we enable the tab is we actually take a look at your catalog. And if we think that we're probably not going to ever accept anything, it's probably not going to work out for us if we give you the tab. It's not going to be good for you. It's not going to be good for me. Here's why I'm not enabling your tab. So we kind of do take a quick look at it. For the most part, with people who've asked us, we've enabled it, and we're pretty honest with people because we do have to reject a lot. There's less space available for prime spots than there are people who want it. So even amazing titles and amazing books do get rejected. We do try to give you honest feedback as to why, even if that honest feedback is, we didn't even look at it. Sorry, we had 1,000 submissions. The first 100 that came in were good. We accepted them. You were 101. We never even looked at yours. Rather than with BookBub, you have no idea. I don't have enough reviews. Cover's no good. Why? We want to at least be honest with you so that you can understand. I think what we do, instead of saying your cover is ugly, I think it says that in the back end, but on the author-facing end, it says this book's cover does not appeal to its target audience, which are people with good taste who want to read that genre. I know. So I mean, we try to buffer the blow, but read between the lines, I think, and you can see what we're really saying. It's not you, it's me.
All right. Oops, muted myself there. So I'm kind of wondering, here's my question I'm asking you that I haven't heard you answer yet on the other podcast, just about the promotion stuff. There's several things in here, like there's a free spotlight, sci-fi and fantasy and horror, deals page spotlight, Kobo Next. There's these 4 or 5 different things in there, and I'm just kind of going through and like, oh yeah, I fit that one, I fit that one, I fit that one. I'll just apply to all of these. I mean, is that what I should be doing, or is there a strategy or some? I don't know, are you more likely to get some than others?
It's a good question. You're probably best to submit to anything you're eligible for. One of the things our merchandisers like to do is they want to see, we want to see authors succeed, and we want to see as many different authors succeed as possible. So we have our favorites, obviously. There's authors we know we can count on. There's actually a list of authors that when we do a promotion, we have them on different lists and say, okay, these are authors who write this kind of fiction. We're looking for that kind of fiction. Let's make sure they know about it. So we at least have a good core of titles that we know we're going to accept. And then we hope to always have some new authors in each promotion. So, for example, if you've submitted to a Kobo Next promo, but you've also submitted to a Daily Deal promo, and the merchandiser sees and go, okay, there's a Lindsay Broker title, there's a Lindsay Broker title. I'm going to have to reject her there, but, I can accept her here. So it's just one of those things where that we really do want to see variety, because keep in mind, we're not just doing this because that's a pretty cover, that's a nice cover, we like this, we like that. We're trying to look at it from the perspective of our customers. What do our customers want to see? The customers who buy the monthly 30% off promo books, we want to give them something new and fresh, because maybe they've already bought all of those books by the core authors that we really like. They sell well. We like to include them in promos, but if we can get some new authors, we can get some fresh content in there, that gives those customers something relevant. It's like the free page, for example. Every Monday we update, and we add 6 new titles across the board. So if somebody came to it last week, they come to it this week, they see 6 new titles. Now, the books from last week are rotated onto page 2, so they're still there for a month. But that fresh content is really, really important. I I take this back to my days as a bookseller. I was at a bookstore in downtown Ottawa, and I was on a bus route. And I thought about all the people every day who drove by or maybe got off the bus right outside my store. And I had this big giant window. And I always felt bad if I didn't update the display once a week because they were seeing the same thing. And so what I took great pride in as a bookseller was trying to put something different so that when they got off the bus that one day, they went, oh wow, there's new things here. There's some things they're familiar with, but there's some new things. And I would try to play on that. And I think our merchandisers, our booksellers, they want to catch the eye of customers. They want to have something new and fun. And so the one thing I will say is that if you've actually been in contact with Taylor or anyone from the Kobo Writing Life team, and we've shown any interest in you or your books, for God's sake, when you have a new release, please email us and let us know. Let us know when it's in pre-order. Believe it or not, we actually care, and we want to know these things because you never know when that just might turn out to be someone's looking for something to put in the hot new releases, and we just saw an email, and it just came in. So the more things that you try, the more likely you're gonna stick with something.
All right, sounds like good information. And just one more quick question on those promotions. Some of them say like they're $5 or $10 or 10%. Is that money that comes out based on the sales you make, or what's the difference there?
Okay, so flat fee. The flat fee is for typically only for free right now because you can't take a percentage of zero, or you can, but you get zero. And part of it is to reduce the noise. If every single promo didn't cost anything, people would just throw everything at it, and we would have more noise to deal with. So that actually reduces the flow because it's only people who are really serious. So that helps us a little bit. It also, if it's a percentage, you don't pay anything if you don't sell anything. If you sell a book, all we do is we shave that percentage off. So instead of giving you 70%, we give you 65%. Or instead of giving you 70%, we give you 60%. The reason the tool is still in beta is there's a functionality where we want to give people a choice, because some authors may, especially authors who do really, 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 really well, they'd end up paying too much in a percentage shave. They would be happy to pay a big flat fee because they know they'll make a lot more money. And so part of the functionality for the tool, the original design was we wanted authors to be able to make a very good business decision and know that they always end up ahead. And so what we don't have yet, but it's functionality that we're trying to fix, is give you the choice where you can say, yes, I'm willing to pay this flat fee, but this other author's not going to pay that flat fee because that would be suicide for them. That other author wants to go with a discount shave, and so that's part of the functionality is helping them understand what a good business decision is for them. And if they haven't done any promos before, it's a huge risk to drop money, right? BookBub, although it's never been a risk at BookBub, has it? If you can give them your money, give them your money. You'll make it back.
I joke that half the reason I started a pen name was just so I could try to apply in the same month for BookBub ads, and so I could get more of them because it's two different authors.
No kidding.
Okay, last question for me. I better let the guys talk a little bit, but we've had a lot of guests lately that have had a lot of success by going with KDP Select and just being exclusive and in Kindle Unlimited. Do you have any thoughts on like why newer authors might want to consider going with Kobo, staying wide, and being everywhere, or do you recommend that people take a shot over there and then go wide?
It's a personal choice. It's kind of like that traditional publishing, self-publishing. Only you know what's right for yourself and your business. I just look at it from a long-term game. I mean, obviously I work for Kobo, so obviously I'm not going to be Kindle's direct Select or KU. I'm obviously not going to be a big advocate. I actually have a title in KU. I've had a title in KU since the beginning. Don't think I don't do market research and understand how this works.
You're going to get fired. They're not going to let you when they find
That's
out.
why they hired me. That's why they hired me.
Spying.
I understand that. I understand the terms completely as an author. I've never made good money off of it. I have seen some perks and I've seen some drawbacks, but I think for every author, it's their own decision. But the one thing I like to think of is it takes time to build your reputation as an author, and if you're not on a platform, it's just that extra time it's going to take when you finally get on that platform. What does it say to somebody who only ever reads on Kobo or only ever reads on iBooks? What does it say if they hear from a friend, oh, I'm going to read so-and-so, oh, that's cool, and they look you up and they can't find you? If your first name isn't Stephen and your last name isn't King, chances are they ain't leaving that platform for you. They're just going to move on to the next author. So I think of those opportunities, and this happens to me every week. I hear from the customer care team, from a customer who's a good customer, who buys lots of books, who says, oh, I'm looking for this book by so-and-so. Gets punted over to me. I look it up and go, so-and-so is in KDP Select. I reach out to so-and-so and say, listen, just want to let you know that some customers want to buy your books. They can't. What should I tell them? And some authors tell them to go screw themselves. That's basically what they're saying to that customer. Is like, I don't care about you. Go read on Kindle, or I don't want to talk to you. And then other authors go, oh my God, that's awesome. Cool. Let them know I'll be back on this date. I'm trying this out. And a lot of authors that I reach out to either weren't even aware of us, which happens, or they were just trying it out. It's like, well, I got to try it out because everyone's got to try it out. So it's an interesting thing. But I think about those lost opportunities, and I would hate to think of customers that I've found on different platforms that I wouldn't have had otherwise. So, I publish directly to Kobo through Kobo Writing Life, but I still have books on Smashwords because there's still customers on Smashwords that buy directly from Smashwords. I want to be available to those customers. So that's just my underlying personal philosophy. And even if Kobo were to fire me tomorrow, I would still publish wide.
All right. Thank you so much for answering my questions. Let me pass you to Joe.
My questions for this are fairly short, and some of them have been touched on before. But first off, most of them pricing related. Do you have any thoughts on what the ideal pricing is right now? Like, what's a good area to put your book, and does it vary, say, with genre or with length?
It does, and it does. Let's pretend we're talking science fiction and fantasy. I think typically with fantasy, because the average book length is going to be higher, that you could probably go with a higher price, right? Because a short fantasy is 80,000 words usually, right?
Yep.
So that's the high fantasy or traditional fantasy. I think look at what the mass market price would be for that book and start at about half of what the mass market price is. Then go and look at the top sellers in that category. And I would try to average a price either down or up, right? And experiment. Price is a verb. It's not a noun.
Right.
Try, $2.99, $3.99, $4.99. What I'm seeing in sci-fi and fantasy is there's probably a tolerance for something in the $4 to $7 range, more so than romance, which tends to be a little bit lower, only because readers typically stay with the book a little bit longer. They don't read them as fast. They enjoy them. It's more like a fine wine than a shot. So they're willing to pay more because they spend more time with the book. And I'm just thinking about that from a Kobo customer perspective. And again, with longer books, you can go longer. The other thing on Kobo, box sets, there's no cap. There's no 70% cap. So you can do a giant box set Mark Dawson's killing it right now. Like his sales last week on a $30 box set were just crazy because his unit sales were, you know, only in the 3 digits, but the money he made was huge. So his net sales were phenomenally higher than someone who'd sold thousands of books the same week at a much reduced price. So that was really, really cool to see. So I hope that answers the question a little bit.
Certainly does. One of the other things we touched on earlier was pricing in different countries. You say in India you got to price as low as possible. Are there any other sort of rules of thumb you've seen across international pricing?
Yeah, so in Canada, Australia, and New Zealand, you could easily go to $1 to $2 higher than the U.S. price, easily. I'm in Canada, we get ripped off all the time. Mass market paperbacks are $12 here for us. Hardcovers are like $35, $40 minimum. So yeah, we get ripped off. In Great Britain, big publishers are very, very aggressive in digital. In Great Britain, you need to price low, $1.99. And in Great Britain, you can go with 49, not just 99. And the same thing with euros, just because the dollar's that much more powerful than the U.S. dollar. And so in Great Britain, you're going to want to go not as low as India, but you're going to want to go low, because anything that's over $5, most of the major publishers, and again, you can go look at the websites and see what are ebooks selling for from the big sci-fi and fantasy authors. What are they priced at? You'll still probably be coming in at a pretty reasonable rate, but you don't have to go as high in the UK.
All right, that's good to know. I'll definitely have to go through and do some adjustments. And the last thing I have here, and I'm not sure if this is even a question that is allowed to be answered, but we recently had an author on here that made a USA Today run, and other bestseller lists. Obviously, people frequently target, like New York Times. Now, for USA Today and New York Times, obviously, Kobo wouldn't be a perfect target because those are U.S. bestsellers, and you do better elsewhere. But do Kobo numbers factor in at all? Do you know, or again,
No,
are you
they
allowed
do.
to say they do?
No, we send. Yeah, no, we send to New York Times. So to actually get on the list, you need to have sales at least 2 or 3 different retailers, and
Right.
we're one of them. So you got Apple, Kindle, Kobo, Nook. I don't know if they look at Google or not, to be quite honest, but you need to be in at least 3 platforms in order for it to count for a New York Times bestseller.
All right. Excellent. Good to know. All right. Well, those are my questions. So on to Jeff for the final bit.
Alrighty, let's see. The first question I have for you is, do you have any insights into getting your book more noticeable at Kobo? For instance, keywords to use, blurbs of a certain size, certain themes to include on the cover, etc.?
Well, apart from the promotions tool, of course, because that's the easy one. I think your series metadata, make sure you've actually filled it out all the way. Series name, if you're writing in a series, and the number. And you can actually use decimals for your number. So you can have interstitiary pieces like short stories that take place between novels. 0 is eligible for a series number. We do a lot of automated recommendations to customers based on that. It also ties your name and your branding in. Also take a look at, there's a field in Kobo Writing Life called imprint. If you're not entering your publisher name in there, you should. Even if your publisher name is your author name, it increases your SEO. It's a clickable link, just like the series title is, just like your author name is. That's something that's very, very valuable. I think those are kind of some basic things you can do all on your own, not having to rely on, third party eyeballs. And then obviously the promotions. If you have the promotions tab, that really does get your book in front of customer eyeballs through email blasts that we do and monthly sales and stuff like that.
What services do you personally use to market your own books?
I'm sorry, I was coughing. I missed that question.
So what services do you personally use to market your own books?
Yeah, with services. BookBub has been huge. It's been absolutely the best one out there. E-reader news today has been okay. It's been hit and miss, and I've used Bargain Booksy and Free Booksy. So those are the third party. I've actually also used the promotions tab in Kobo, and believe it or not, even though I'm that merchandiser's boss, he's still rejected me from promotions. He There's no favors. There's no favors taken. He puts the books that he thinks are going to sell. And if he doesn't think I'm going to be part of this promo, I'm not part of it. So those are things that I've done. I've also used. We have a free book giveaways. It's manual. We can create a coupon code for your book. But when I do book signings, because I do physical book signings with my traditionally published books, and I do a lot of Comic-Cons lately. Those have been phenomenal. If you're a science fiction author and there's a local Comic-Con, I sincerely, recommend you check out getting a vendor table or getting together with a couple other authors if it's too expensive and checking it out, because oh my lord, at a Comic-Con I sell way more books than I ever sell when I go do a bookstore signing, because you're looking at your target audience. So sci-fi fantasy writers, and I learned this from Kevin J. Anderson, who now has a booth the size of a Random House's booth at a major trade show at most Comic-Cons, because Wordfire Press, they publish about 500 different titles, as well as some of his backlist and stuff like that. But so when doing these book signings, I create cards where I put a coupon code on the back, and so if I'm signing a nonfiction paranormal book and say, well, what else do you like to read? Oh, I like to read thrillers. Hey, would you like a free thriller? You can download a free app on Kobo, on iOS or Android. Just use this coupon code on the back of this postcard. I'll sign it for you and take that home with you. And I've used that to try and get extra eyeballs and downloads, because those downloads still increase the book's temperature, and we call it temperature. So even a lot of clicks and looks at a book do increase a book's temperature. It tells our systems that customers are interested in this book. So if a lot of people even just go to that web page and look at it and click on it in a search result, that does increase the temperature. Obviously, the temperature increases significantly more when someone buys it. But hey, anything you can do to increase that book's temperature is gonna help you.
Absolutely. I was looking at your website, and I see that you got a newsletter sign up, and I also see that you use 3 different pen names. Do you have one newsletter that encompasses all 3 names, or do you have 3 separate newsletters?
Yeah, see, I used to. I think I've gotten back to just going with Mark Leslie Lefebvre in general, and Mark Lefebvre's the bookseller guy, and Mark Leslie is everything else. I used to do some nonfiction under Mark Leslie Lefebvre, and it was just crazy. So I've got 2 things I haven't done. I haven't done a good job of updating my website. What I have done with my newsletter lately is I have added some of my day job stuff, because I've had readers of my newsletter, and I don't have a lot of readers of my newsletter, but I have readers. And one thing I encourage authors to do is, hey, those small group of readers that you have are more than you had last week, and they may grow, and it may become a little bit better. But what I've done recently is I've tried to include some personal stuff outside of just book stuff, because people find that interesting, and maybe they'll find some value in it too.
Do you have any sort of incentives you give out people just to sign up?
Yeah, I give away. I use BookFunnel. Is that the name of the company? I use BookFunnel, and I give away a full book. I haven't changed that book in a while, but I do have a note that says, if you already have this book, because maybe it's one of the ones you bought, just email me and tell me if you want Mobi, PDF, or EPUB, and I'll send you I'll send you any of my other books. Just let me know. I haven't done any advertising or any of the sexy Mark Dawson things. I've just put the links in the back of the books. I've put the links on the website, and when I do in-person book signings, I bring a clipboard. Yes, old school. bring a clipboard, and if I'm doing a talk at a library, which I do a lot of, I say, hey, if you want to find out when my next books are coming out, all you have to do is put your name and your email on this list here, and I will send you information about my next book, and when you sign up, you'll get a free ebook. So it helps.
Old school, gotta love it. All right, I think that's pretty much it for me. Let me patch you back over to Lindsay, and we'll go ahead and wrap this up.
All right. Yeah, I actually asked on Twitter. We got a couple of questions from the audience there. If you have a minute to answer those, just real quick, how do short stories do on Kobo?
You have to clearly communicate in the synopsis that this is a short story to make sure that the customers don't get ripped off. I have some authors that do really, really well with short stories, but they tend to work better rather than an independent short story on its own, a mini bundle of short stories. So imagine you have themed short stories, 3, 5, 6, bundle them together, and that's about, it depends. It could be 10, 15, 30,000 words. Those tend to do better than standalones. Standalone short stories for free, they do work well because it gives the reader a chance to check you out for free, and if they like your writing style, and if they like the characters, if it ties back to a full-length book, that could be a good hook for you. And so that works out really well because, again, on Kobo, you don't have to be exclusive for 90 days to get your measly 5 days of free. You can make it free as long as you want. Yeah, it's another stab at them. I can do that, right? They're big, they can take it.
I'd like to pretend that somebody from Amazon listens to our podcast, but I think you're probably safe that it won't get back to them.
Then they'll come break my legs.
Yeah, that's a long drive up to Canada, though. All right. This
Not
is
from
Scott.
Seattle.
This is Scott King asking, what genres or age groups don't sell well on Kobo, and is it worth doing a standalone nonfiction book there?
Nonfiction does well. Nonfiction does better in the U.S. Through the American Booksellers Association, through the indie booksellers that we sell through. What doesn't sell well in ebooks in general are kids' books, actual picture books. That market has not yet caught on. It's still grandparents and parents buying books for kids, and so even with the dedicated kids book page and merchandising that we've done, it's still such a small percentage. Now, young reader and young adult are doing really well because adults are reading a lot of those books, but kids are still buying print. Kids are still buying paperbacks.
Okay. Do you see anybody making any headway with that kind of 10 to 12-year-old age group? Is that what you meant with young readers?
Yeah, so some of the young readers with more of the text-based books, we're seeing some activity there, but that's only because some of the young reader books are containing content that's more interesting to adults. Now, here's a perfect example. English is a second language. Nonfiction book written for that age group is probably going to be a lot easier to appreciate and enjoy than, an adult book. And so think about not just in Canada and the US, think about internationally as people are learning English. They're looking for fun yet easier to read books that don't have the big vocabulary. So think about the stuff that you see James Patterson doing with the young reader, where he's co-written with, is it James? Yeah, James Patterson's done some of those younger novels, hasn't he? There was a mainstream big name writer who was doing some of those just before I left my physical book world when I was selling books, and I was seeing those come in and thinking, wow, if a big publisher's doing this, there's obviously some market there, right?
All right. Well, I don't know if it was James Patterson, but I wouldn't be surprised since he does everything else now.
Maximum Ride, that's right, yeah.
All right, cool. Now I'm imagining young adult fantasy for second language English readers there's like these dragon names and crazy names and stuff, and they'd be trying to figure out, is that an English word that I'm supposed to know, or?
Everyone in Texas has that name.
All right. Well, that's it for our questions tonight. Where can people find you, and are there any of your books that you want to plug that you could check out?
I have a free short story on all platforms, a collection called Snowman Shivers. If you want to understand what it's like to be Canadian and scared, Snowman Shivers, you can check it out on all platforms, especially Kobo, of course. You can find me, I'm at Mark Leslie on Twitter. You probably want to look at KoboWritingLife.com or check out at Kobo Writing Life on Twitter, and those are some of the things you can keep up with what we're up to in the marketplace. And thanks for having me on the podcast.
All right. Well, thanks for coming on even with your cold, and I hope we didn't keep you up too late over there.
I'm hitting the hay right now.
All right. Well, really appreciate your time. Thank you, Mark.
All right, Mark, thanks a lot for all the info. Nice to meet you, sir.
Nice to meet you guys as well.
All right, and thanks everyone for listening. This is episode 78. Come on by marketingsff.com if you want to leave a comment or say hi. And we're on YouTube and iTunes and all the usual places. Thanks for listening. Bye-bye.
Bye.